Before words arrive, something else does. Long before a man explains himself. Long before he articulates affection or pulls away in silence. There is a small shift in the air around him, subtle, delicate, and strangely revealing. People like to think relationships are built on conversations, but most of the truth is exchanged in quieter places. In the softening of his shoulders when he feels safe, in the restrained tension in his jaw when he is overwhelmed, in the way his eyes linger with openness or pull back into themselves. This first recognition is rarely verbal. It is a sensation, a felt understanding, something in you notices before you know what you're noticing. Human beings are wired for this kind of perception. The nervous system reads emotional cues with astonishing accuracy, picking up micro-expressions, tone shifts, and small hesitations that never make it into conscious awareness. When someone treats you in a certain way, gentle, dismissive, present, rushed, the body interprets it instantly, even before the mind begins to form a story. This is why a conversation can sound perfectly calm while something inside you whispers. Something is off. It isn't intuition in a mystical sense. It's biology, it's pattern recognition. Every interaction with a man is a communication from two nervous systems learning each other's rhythms. His behavior becomes a language, and with time, you begin to hear it more clearly. When he cares, there is an ease in his presence, patience, and attunement, an absence of urgency. When he struggles to care or fears caring, the opposite emerges. Distance, distraction, an invisible barrier between his heart and his actions. But recognition doesn't come all at once. It arrives in fragments, moments that accumulate until they form a story. Man's soul reveals itself in how he handles the smallest things, whether he pauses to understand instead of react, whether he listens between your words, whether he treats your vulnerability as something delicate instead of inconvenient. Often, people wait for dramatic displays of love or disrespect, imagining that clarity comes in loud moments. But most revelations are quiet. They appear in how he greets you after a long day, in how he holds space for your frustration or shuts down in the face of it, in whether he remains kind even when tired, or only when it is easy. There is honesty. In the way he treats you when no one is watching. Honesty. In how he speaks about others when he has nothing to gain. Honesty. In the consistency between his words and his warmth. These patterns form slowly, almost imperceptibly, until they become unmistakable. Recognition also brings confusion, because sometimes a man offers moments of softness that feel sincere, only to retreat without explanation. Sometimes he is warm, then cold, present, then distant, and people often mistake inconsistency for complexity, assuming unpredictability means depth. But inconsistency is rarely deep. It is often simply unprocessed fear or unhealed wounds. Still, the emotional experience is real. The push and pull, the hope and hesitation, the longing for clarity in someone who has not yet found clarity within themselves. This first chapter of understanding is about noticing, not judging, not interpreting, not assigning meaning too quickly. It is about allowing the emotional truth of his treatment to be seen as information, not a verdict, not a prophecy, just information about where he is internally. Every man carries his own inner world, his capacity to stay, his tolerance for vulnerability, his ability to speak truth instead of avoid it, his relationship with tenderness, and whether he realizes it or not. That inner world leaks into the way he treats those closest to him. Recognition is simply the quiet moment when you finally see the pattern, not through analysis, but through felt experience. This is the beginning. The moment the signals become clearer, the moment you understand that treatment is never random, it is the emotional fingerprint of his soul. Every man who stands before you is a continuation of everything that came before him. His gestures, his silences, his tenderness, his distance, none of it began with you. They are echoes from rooms he no longer remembers, from voices he once depended on, from the emotional climate that shaped his earliest sense of self. Psychology calls these beginnings attachment templates, but in simpler terms, they are the first lessons a child learns about love, whether it is safe, whether it is scarce, whether it is conditional, and whether it is something he must earn. These lessons stay long after childhood ends. They continue to whisper instructions. If he grew up with warmth, he learned that closeness is not a threat. He learned that affection doesn't disappear when mistakes happen, that needs are not burdens, that emotions do not have to be hidden to be accepted. This kind of man often carries a quiet steadiness. He knows how to reach out, how to repair after conflict, how to soften without shame. His treatment reflects familiarity with care, but not everyone learns warmth early. Some boys grow up in houses where love is inconsistent, arriving in brief flashes between long stretches of emotional absence. They learn to wait, to watch, to read every small shift in the room. They become experts in anticipating disappointment. When these boys become men, their treatment often reveals a fragile dance leaning in when hope rises, pulling away the moment fear awakens. Not because they don't care, but because care feels like a risk too large to hold. Other men grow up with criticism, sharper than affection. They learn that approval must be earned, that mistakes are threats, that softness is unsafe, and so they grow guarded, analytical, controlled. They may appear confident, but it is a confidence built on vigilance, not trust. A man raised in emotional unpredictability may struggle with consistency, not out of malice, but because no one ever modeled what consistency feels like. His treatment reflects the internal instability he learned to normalize. There are also men who were taught silence, whose fathers spoke little, whose mothers carried unspoken pain, whose households valued endurance over expression. In these environments, emotions shrink. Vulnerability becomes something to hide, not share. These men often treat others with distance, not because they feel nothing, but because feeling was never given space to grow. Every man carries the emotional vocabulary he was handed. Some were taught full sentences, others were given fragments, and yet the roots beneath behavior go deeper than family, culture, masculinity. Survival all shape the emotional architecture of a man. Some were taught to protect, but not connect, to provide, but not express, to act strong, but never look inward. A man who was rewarded for self-sufficiency may struggle to let someone in. A man who learned to hide pain may struggle to recognize yours. A man who survived by shutting down may not know how to stay open even when he wants to. None of this excuse is hurtful behavior, but it explains why treatment is rarely random. It is patterned, rehearsed, inherited. When you observe how a man treats you, you are witnessing the unspoken history he carries, the ghosts of expectations he absorbed, the unmet needs he never acknowledged, the fears he still negotiates internally. Some men are aware of their origins. Most are not. Their past acts through them, gently or harshly, until something forces reflection. Understanding these roots doesn't mean accepting what harms you. It simply means seeing the full picture, recognizing that behavior is not created in the moment, but shaped over years of learning what love feels like. The way a man treats you is never just today. It is yesterday, returning in a new form. It is the sum of his tenderness and his wounds, his memories and his missing pieces, the quiet inheritance he brings into every connection. A man's behavior may look simple on the surface: a text, a silence, a softened voice, a tightened expression, yet beneath every action lies a network of internal processes shaped by biology, emotion, and learned regulation. Understanding how a man treats you requires understanding what happens inside him long before his behavior reaches you. Human connection begins not in words, but in the nervous system. Every man carries an emotional baseline, a unique pattern of regulation shaped by temperament and experience. Some bodies move naturally toward closeness, finding safety in contact and conversation. Others are wired toward distance, not because they don't feel, but because feeling comes with overwhelm. Neuroscience calls this the window of tolerance, the zone in which a person can stay engaged without shutting down or reacting impulsively. A man who grew up safe often has a wide window. He can handle conflict without withdrawing, vulnerability without fear, intimacy without losing himself. But a man shaped by unpredictability may have a narrow window. Too much closeness feels suffocating. Too much emotion feels destabilizing. Too much honesty feels dangerous. When he pulls back, it may not be rejection, it may be regulation. His nervous system, choosing survival over connection. Then there is the psychology of expression itself. Men are taught, directly or indirectly, that emotion must be managed quietly, that sadness is weakness, fear is failure, and tenderness is something to hide. So their emotional world becomes internal, compressed into smaller spaces within them. They feel, but they seldom name. They want, but they seldom articulate. They struggle, but they often struggle inwardly. This internalization shapes treatment. A man who cannot name his emotions treats others through behavior rather than language. Instead of saying, "I'm overwhelmed," he becomes distant. Instead of saying, "I care," he shows up quietly at your door. Instead of saying, "I'm scared of losing you," he becomes cautious, sensitive, reactive. His actions are his vocabulary.